The world is changing, and not for the better. Our planet's climate is undergoing a dramatic shift, driven largely by human activities. This warming trend has profound consequences, and perhaps none are as visible and concerning as the rising sea levels that threaten to reshape our coastlines. As glaciers and ice sheets melt at an alarming rate, coastal communities around the globe face an unprecedented challenge. The United States, with its extensive coastline, is particularly vulnerable to this rising tide. From the bustling cities of the East Coast to the low-lying deltas of the Gulf Coast, the threat of inundation is real and growing. The science is clear. If we don't take swift and decisive action to mitigate climate change, the consequences will be devastating. We must transition to a clean energy economy, invest in resilient infrastructure, and protect our natural defenses against rising seas. The time for denial and delay is over. The future of our coastlines, and indeed the planet, hangs in the balance. The time for action is now. Florida, the Sunshine State, boasts miles of pristine beaches and vibrant coastal cities. However, this paradise is increasingly threatened by the rising sea. The state's low elevation and porous limestone bedrock make it particularly susceptible to inundation. Miami, a major economic hub, is already experiencing regular flooding during high tides. As sea levels continue to rise, the frequency and severity of these floods will only increase, threatening homes, businesses, and critical infrastructure. Louisiana, home to the Mississippi River Delta, faces a similar predicament. The Delta, a vital ecosystem and a hub for the oil and gas industry, is rapidly disappearing due to a combination of rising sea levels, subsidence, and human activities. Coastal erosion is eating away at the land, displacing communities and threatening the state's unique culture and heritage. The loss of wetlands also exacerbates the risk of flooding, as these natural buffers are no longer present to absorb storm surges. The challenges facing Florida and Louisiana are a microcosm of the broader threat facing coastal communities across the United States. From the Outer Banks of North Carolina to the San Francisco Bay Area, rising sea levels are putting homes, businesses, and ecosystems at risk. The economic costs of inaction are staggering, and the social consequences are equally dire. As sea levels rise, the very fabric of these coastal communities is being threatened. Displacement, economic hardship, and loss of cultural heritage are just some of the challenges that lie ahead. The time for action is now. We must invest in resilient infrastructure, protect and restore coastal ecosystems, and reduce our greenhouse gas emissions to mitigate the worst impacts of climate change. The future of our coastlines depends on it. The impacts of climate change are already forcing people to leave their homes. As rising sea levels, extreme weather events, and other climate-related disasters become more frequent and intense, the number of climate migrants is expected to increase dramatically. In the United States, we are already witnessing the early stages of this human exodus. Coastal communities, particularly those in low-lying areas, are on the front lines of this crisis. As their homes become uninhabitable, people are forced to relocate to higher ground, often leaving behind their communities, their livelihoods, and their cultural heritage. This displacement can have devastating social and economic consequences, exacerbating existing inequalities and creating new challenges for both migrants and the communities that receive them. The movement of people due to climate change is not a future threat. It is happening now. From Alaska to Louisiana, communities are grappling with the realities of climate migration. Indigenous communities, who often have a deep connection to their ancestral lands, are particularly vulnerable to displacement. The loss of their homes and traditional ways of life represents a profound cultural loss. As climate change intensifies, the scale of climate migration is likely to increase, posing significant challenges for governments and communities alike. We need comprehensive strategies to address the needs of climate migrants, including providing affordable housing, job training, and access to essential services. We must also invest in climate adaptation measures to reduce the need for displacement in the first place. Section 4. Shifting Sands, Environmental and Demographic Transformations. The impacts of climate change are not limited to rising sea levels. Extreme weather events such as hurricanes, floods and droughts are becoming more frequent and intense, further exacerbating the challenges facing coastal communities. These events can cause widespread damage, displace populations and disrupt economies. The changing climate is also altering the environment in significant ways. Coastal erosion is accelerating, wetlands are disappearing, and saltwater intrusion is contaminating freshwater sources. These changes have profound implications for biodiversity, ecosystem services, and human well-being. The demographic landscape of coastal regions is also shifting. As some communities are forced to relocate due to climate change, others are experiencing an influx of new residents. This migration can lead to changes in population density, housing availability, and the demand for public services. The social and economic consequences of these changes are far-reaching. Climate change can exacerbate existing inequalities, putting vulnerable populations at greater risk. It can also lead to economic disruption as businesses are forced to close and jobs are lost. Addressing these challenges requires a comprehensive and equitable approach that considers the needs of all communities. Section 5. A call to action, confronting the future of coastal America. The challenges facing coastal communities in the United States are significant, but not insurmountable. We have the knowledge, the technology, and the resources to address climate change and build more resilient communities. What we need now is the political will and the collective action to make it happen. We must transition to a clean energy economy, reducing our reliance on fossil fuels and investing in renewable energy sources. This will not only mitigate climate change, but also create new economic opportunities and improve public health. We must also invest in climate adaptation measures, such as building seawalls, restoring wetlands, and developing drought-resistant crops. These measures can help protect communities from the impacts of climate change and reduce the need for costly disaster relief. Finally, we must work together to build more equitable and resilient communities. This means ensuring that all communities have access to the resources they need to adapt to climate change, regardless of their income or location. It also means addressing the root causes of inequality and creating a more just and sustainable future for all. The future of our coastal communities, and indeed the planet, depends on it.